Welcome, everyone, to this presentation by Appian on Do you have a framework for digital success? My name is Malcolm Ross, the Vice President of Product for Appian. I'm really pleased to announce the participation of Andrew Spanyi, Founder and Managing Director from Spanyi International, and Alice Wei, Director of Digital Innovations from University of South Florida, on this session on Do you have a framework for digital success? We're not just going to hear about technology insights, but as well team structures and organization structures of how you actually bring an enterprise into the digital age, setting up the right technologies, right frame of mind, and team structures and agile approaches to ensure success in your operations. If you'd like to ask questions to both Andrew and Alice during the course of this presentation, feel free to use the questions box on the right-hand side of the ON24 presentation format. And with that, I'm really pleased to announce Andrew Spanyi as our first presenter. As mentioned, Andrew Spanyi is the founder and managing director of Spanyi International Incorporated. Andrew Spanyi's work in business process management is internationally recognized, and he is the founder and managing director of Spanyi International and assists organizations in implementing customer experience, process improvement, and digital business strategies. Andrew is also the author of 3 books, including Operational Leadership from 2010, More or Less the Power of Process Management, Business Process Management is a Team Sport, Play to Win, and over 80 other articles. Since 1992, he has worked on over 160 major improvement projects and has developed dozens of training programs. Andrew is formerly an adjunct professor at Babson College, and he's currently an advisor to the Associate of Business Process Management Professionals. Welcome, Andrew, and thank you for joining us today on this session on Do you have a framework for digital success? And I'll pass it off to you for our first insights onto this topic.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Malcolm. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to have this opportunity to talk about a framework for digital success. I'll start out by talking about some of the current business challenges in our business environment, and then talk about what leading companies do in deploying digital technology. Following that up with a discussion on a framework for digital success, and closing with some best practices and pitfalls to avoid and a checklist for you to consider. So that's basically what I'm going to do about today. So the challenge today, I think, is the environment is changing significantly. 89% of the Fortune 500 companies that were on the Fortune 500 list in 1955 were no longer on the list in 2014, and the average half-life of a business competency has dropped significantly over the past 3 decades. Indeed, if we think about it, a decade ago, Microsoft was probably the only so-called digital company among the top 10 most highly valued companies in the world today. Now, in 2018, 5 of the top 10, Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook, are among the top 10 most highly valued digital companies. And yet, in spite of that, in spite of the advance of digital, Forbes reported a couple of years ago that 84% of digital transformations fail. And that statistic is noteworthy because if we take a look at other transformations, perhaps business process reengineering, perhaps surveys by McKinsey, the statistic is really closer to 2/3 or 70%. So why is it that digital transformation has such higher failure rate? Well, part of the reason, I think, is the pace at which digital technology has advanced. There's a really good book by Louis Lamoureux called Doing Digital Right, and he proposed that there are actually 3 waves. There are 3 waves in digital. The first wave being prior to 2000. The next wave, the second wave, was where the focus was on social, mobile, analytics, and cloud technologies, the so-called SMAC technologies. And now in the third wave, there's a whole host of digital tools, including big data, artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, deep learning, the Internet of Things, robotic process automation, and blockchain, and others. And so, if we take a look at the whole range of digital technologies, frankly, the ability of organizations to develop the skills needed for the effective implementation of this expanded new set of technologies lags well behind the range of available tools. So, and on top of that, the environment itself is changing. There are 3 laws driving digital. Well, most of us are familiar with Moore's law. Basically, about every 2 years, computing power doubles, but there are 2 other laws that are equally important and in combination have a multiplier effect on the pace of technology. Gilder's law says that bandwidth grows at least 3 times faster than computer power. In other words, if we think that computing power doubles every 2 years as per Moore's law, then communications power doubles about every 8 months. Metcalfe's law then states that the value of a telecommunications network is proportional to the square of the number of connected users in the system, and this applies not just to telecommunication networks, but also to social networks. So I suspect that very few people really understand the multiplier effect of these 3 laws in combination. I certainly don't, but there's one thing for sure, as the recent Microsoft commercial said, that today, right now, we have more power at our fingertips than entire generations that came before us. And I think that's pretty thought-provoking stuff, in my view. The fact is that today's customer wants to be able to interact and transact across digital and social platforms when and where it suits them. And that's why I think we need a new way of thinking. We need a new way of thinking. And the new way of thinking has to be focused on customer experience. And customers are demanding that companies be easy to do business with. Now, that's not the first time that this has been said. If we go back to the 90s, there's an excellent website called customers.com, and the 2 founders, Patty Sable and Ronnie Marshak, wrote in the 90s that for customers to be satisfied with the service that they get, companies have to be easy to do business with. The late Dr. Michael Hammer wrote in his book, The Agenda, which was a 2002 book, he wrote that it's really important for companies to be easy to do business with. What's different now, however, is that customers are demanding that. Customer experience leaders are reaping the benefits of being easy to do business with. A Forrester report in 2016 found that customer experience leaders achieved average revenue growth of 17%, while laggards with customer experience achieved just 3% growth over the same period. That's a pretty huge change, but that's why organizations are deploying digital technology to be easy to do business with. So what are the leading companies' practices? Well, back in 2011, researchers at the MIT Initiative on Digital Economy identified that leading companies use digital to transform both the customer experience and operational processes. And by so doing, they can simultaneously challenge their business model. And this was in stark contrast to less successful digital programs, where companies took a technology-led approach to solve discrete business problems of relatively small scope, or attempted to deploy digital solely within their departmental boundaries. Now, while precisely how to do this is not quite clear, we do know some things. We know, for example, on one hand, it's pretty clear that a successful digital program has to be led from the top down. We also know that employees in this day and age want to work for leaders who get digital. There's pretty strong evidence to support that the integrated use of multiple digital technologies will yield superior results to just using one tool at a time in this connected fashion. And we know that digital is here to stay. Gartner reported last year that somewhere around 300 of the Fortune 500 companies have a chief data officer or equivalent. This is 6 times more than the number of chief customer officers in the Fortune 500 and 12 to 15 times more than the estimated number of chief process officers. So what's needed now, I think, is a shift in management attention. And what's needed is shifting management attention from inside out, which is basically focusing on cost and volume and profits, to outside in, looking at the business from the customer's point of view. There's a shift needed from looking at value chains, which tend to be linear and static, to value pathways, which tend to be adaptive. A shift needed from thinking in a linear fashion to a dynamic fashion. A shift from focusing on our rules and our policies in a bureaucratic manner to being more adaptive and agile. A shift is needed from focusing on what departments do in a silo to what departments need to do together collaboratively to achieve greater value for customers. A shift from simply using analytics to describe what's happening today to using analytics to predict and even to prescribe what might have to happen in the future. And the first 2 of these shifts are quite important, so let me say a few more words about those. The shift from inside out to outside in is particularly important, I think, to deploy digital technologies. The dominant mindset from an inside-out perspective is we know better than our customers. And what organizations do when they have that perspective is they use digital principally to reduce cost. The outside-in perspective, which I believe is the right perspective to best deploy digital technology, is we will win when we create value for customers. And we use voice of the customer and focus groups and other forms of feedback to design business processes, to design metrics that matter to customers, and to decide which sets of technology to best use. Similarly, the move from chains to pathways, I think, is fairly important. And in this respect, we have Dr. Michael Porter defined his model quite a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 decades ago, in terms of the value chains that create value for the company, and that has served us well for many decades. But now, what we need is a more adaptive view. In speaking with Mal Postings, the Chief Technology Officer at IQVIA, he reinforced the fact that success today is no longer about value chains. Organizations now need to embrace value pathways, which are more adaptive, more cross-functional in nature, and they ride on the rails of a low-code, cloud-based technology to create value for customers and the company. Mr. Postings has a big picture view of technology at IQVIA, and his high-level view features 8 different technology environments for innovation, which really connect various technologies in a very novel way. And it's this high-level view of technology that's really required to get best value out of digital. So moving forward beyond these two shifts, I think what's important is for organizations to get better at connecting needs and actions. And if we look at a customer journey map, a very simple one on the left-hand side of this slide, which is a business-to-consumer example. So, for example, I'm aware, I need, I research, I decide, I buy, I receive, I pay, I use, I resolve. What's important is not just to start out with a customer journey map, but to understand which internal business processes create value at each so-called moment of truth along that customer journey. So, for example, in terms of I buy and I receive, the relevant business process is order to delivery. And the question to answer is, how easy are we to do business with? What % of the time do we deliver our orders on time, complete, and error-free? Similarly, in terms of resolving issues, the relevant business process is inquiry to resolution. How easy are we to do business with? Do we offer our customers alternatives in terms of chat, email, talking directly with a customer service rep? Are we making best use of digital technology to resolve any issues? And this is a little bit more complex than it might seem, because the language that customer experience teams and the language that process improvement teams appear to use is actually quite different. And it can be a challenge to integrate the work of these two teams. And so this is the framework that I propose for success with digital technologies. It's a conceptual framework. The customer's at the top, and the customer should drive everything we do with digital technology. The hub is a low-code process framework in the cloud that's in the center. And on that hub, we can hang all kinds of different technologies, whether it's robotic process automation or Internet of Things, etc., and thereby challenge our business model, the business model being where we play, how we win, how we deliver our products and services. And also in this conceptual model is change management. I mean, for decades we have seen that the track record with transformation is frankly not so good. And part of the reason for that is organizations do not integrate change management into what they do. So the framework for digital success needs to start with the customer, have a process hub, take advantage of the technologies, have integrated change management, and challenge the current business model for optimal success. And the technologies driving digital are expanding significantly, as I mentioned earlier. Social, mobile, analytics, and cloud are now table stakes. Anything you do with digital, if it does not take advantage of social and mobile and analytics and cloud, we're behind the times. Cognitive computing, unbelievably powerful, and many organizations are taking advantage. Geico, for example, is using a Watson-based cognitive computing system to learn underwriting guidelines, read risk submissions, and effectively help people underwrite. Big data has a huge amount of traction. The current edition of Fortune magazine, the cover story is Big Data Meets Biology. Internet of Things, robotic process automation. Some people have called it the dumbest of the smart technologies, but amazing traction because there's great ROI from combining RPA with BPM. RPA basically just automates what humans do, and the huge ROI is because it typically has modest project scope and requires minimal systems integration. It can be done pretty fast, but it needs the framework from BPM for optimal results. So how do the best companies deploy digital technologies with this framework? They assess, they plan, and execute. We could actually have a little acronym, APE, assess, plan, execute. Assess, look at the business from the outside in, the customer's point of view. Look also from the inside out. But ask, how can digital technology improve the customer experience at each moment of truth along the customer journey, and measure the quality and timeliness with which activities take place. In the planning phase, do we have a vision for our digital program? We know that it has to be led from the top down. Do we have a strong leadership coalition? Do we have the right pacing? I mean, organizations are tired of waiting for months for results. They want faster, better results. And do we have IT engagement? Just this morning, I received an email which basically said that legacy systems are holding back financial service institutions from best taking advantage of digital technology. And executing on digital processes, the framework, customer is the focus, mobile and cloud are table stakes, and a BPM framework that is low code in the cloud can have significant benefits. So taking action. Couple of stories. Quintiles, that is now IQVIA, they decided to improve the patient onboarding in the clinical trials process. They took an end-to-end workflow view. They combined digitization, artificial intelligence for translations, and streamlining workflow to compress cycle time. Indeed, they compressed cycle time by over 25%, and they're now considering how RPA can be integrated with their view. In a few minutes, we'll hear from Alice Wei on the experience of University of South Florida as well, which is very exciting indeed, and I look forward to hearing from Alice on that. But pitfalls to avoid. I mean, the key pitfalls, I believe, is not placing the customer first, or deploying digital by department instead of focusing on customer, or implementing technology just for its own sake. And then, of course, there are other pitfalls that apply to other forms of transformation, like lack of leadership, lack of strategy, insufficient emphasis on change management. But I would argue that placing the customer first is something that's really important. And the process-based view that I've been arguing, that it's important to measure what matters to customers and solve the real business problems that customers have. I believe that in the future, business to business has greater opportunities for digital than even business to consumer, for a number of reasons. It's important, of course, to implement iteratively and rapidly, and I think a customer-centric, business process-based view gets organizations to work together better and have more clarity on strategy and direction and measure the things that really matter to customers. So that's pretty well, what I want to share with you. There's a checklist. I have a paper on the Appian website called A Framework for Digital Success, and there's a 10-question checklist in that paper. I would invite you to take a look at that, and I think you might find it thought-provoking. And in a nutshell, if your organization aligns customer centricity with a process-based view, I think you're more likely to achieve the full value of digital, because digital transformation is not just a bunch of tools, it's a mindset. And thank you so much. I look forward to your questions at the end of the session. And Malcolm, may I pass this back to you?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That was so insightful. And, especially in IT organizations, it's so easy to get focused on the internal operations and lose that outside perspective that you highlight so well. Appreciate the insights. And, of course, we're going to pass off to Alice Wei now. And it's a quick introduction. Alice Wei is the Director of Digital Innovations at the University of South Florida. Alice leads a unique coalition of talents in web development, UI and UX design, search marketing, custom programming, e-learning, and intelligent business process management that collaborate together to create new and exciting methods of delivering content and services for the USF administration, faculty, staff, and the future healthcare providers. So Alice, really looking forward to hearing your insights on the actual implementation and action and team organization structures you've adopted. Alice, I pass it off to you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Hello, everyone. So to piggyback off of what Andrew has talked about in this first half of this presentation, I really want to kind of show what we've done as examples of what Andrew has talked about and how we've addressed digital transformation at the university. So I'll start with the first thing that our CIO loves to talk about is focus. If you don't have focus in the organization, then you can't get anything done, or you'll finish halfway through everything and not have anything complete. And so one of the things that we really focused on as an organization, as IT, is our Agile basics. We moved to Agile, I would say, almost 10 years ago now. However, I think a lot of you can relate when I say, does your Agile look something like this, where you have burn downs that don't really burn down, and you have velocities that are unpredictable. That was us, I would say, about 5 years ago. We've come a long way, but as the Agile industry matures and it becomes more broad than just programming or for development projects, there's these topics that you see popping up on search engines talking about how Agile is dead or it doesn't work. And we came to that conclusion about 5 years ago ourselves, where we felt, well, this isn't really working for us. What are we doing wrong? And it really took, if you think about it in a Gartner analogy, we really entered the trough of disillusionment when it came to Agile about 5 years ago, because we thought, this isn't working for us. We really need to find a new method, perhaps, of doing project management, because it's really not delivering the value that we thought we would get out of it. And fortunately for us, we ran into some really great partners in Appian when they came down and did one of the first projects with us, which really taught us what really good Agile does. And we took that and ran with it. And the first thing that we did was go back to the basics of Agile. That was our first focus, is we weren't doing our basics very well. We weren't writing our user stories very well. We did not have really good norms identified. We didn't even really talk about what definition of done is, acceptance criteria. Those are all things that were really important to good core Agile practices that we did not do. And so the first layer of maturity that we focused on was just our basics. And we had really great partners internally with our customers that came along with us and did Agile Training 101 with us. So we not only did IT understand Agile, we also had our clients understand Agile. Now, you should remember probably a point in time when you learned how to ride the bicycle. And the thing about bikes are you could do just about any kind of skill after you learned how to initially ride a two-wheel bike. And that's very similar to Agile concepts. And the biggest piece that we learned as we matured in our Agile journey is that not all Scrum Masters or product owners are created the same, nor are projects. And so you should probably align the skill level of the individuals to the risk of the project. You would not want to assign someone that you've just trained, just sent to training on Agile to be running a major critical project for you, because most likely they're going to fail, or they're going to use not Agile methods to get you through the finish line. And that is something that's kind of a no-brainer. However, we did this to ourselves quite often for many years until we realized this isn't the way to go. And you can have a Scrum Master that only rides with 3 wheels, so they're still junior, or you can have someone that goes mountain biking. And those are you want to pair the skill set, the maturity of their skills to the project relative to how important it is to you as an organization. The next thing we did was really focus on measurable goals. This was very hard for us as a university. We generally like to kind of say what we want to do, and we don't push enough on our clients to say, well, how are you going to actually measure if this was a successful endeavor or not? And how is this fitting into the big picture of everything that you're doing at this college or at the university? We've generally had those conversations, but we've never really mapped it out with the client so we understand what they're trying to go towards versus how can we align with them and help them along their way. And one of the things that we implemented was the zero planning, where we plan 2 weeks. We lock our clients in a conference room for 2 weeks, and we plan out what we're going to deliver for the next quarter with them. We have deans that come in. We have VPs that come in. Whoever is needed to make decisions on this project, we ask them to dedicate 2 weeks of their time to us so that we can plan out the work accordingly. We also do impact mapping with our deans and our senior leadership so that we have an understanding of where they want to go, whether it's this year, a quarter out, or maybe 5 years later. We like to do these kind of mappings with them so that we get an understanding of where they want to go, and then we can kind of come in from a later point and say, well, here is where the technology can help you, or here is where we should implement the technology that can help you. The next thing that we focus on is the concept of minimally viable product. This is something that IT struggles with constantly, which is, yes, we can commit to anything that you would like us to deliver, client, but we have a very hard time negotiating what pieces should not fall into this release, per se. And what we do when we do our story mapping with our clients, which is done in the 2-week zero planning that I mentioned, we actually together decide as IT, as our clients, and as our whoever it may be, our consultant at the time as well, where is the line of MVP? So as you can see in this picture down here, there's a blue masking tape across the bottom of the wall. This was the beginning of negotiating what falls off of this delivery. It doesn't fall off permanently, but the clients understand that this means that for the delivery date that we've agreed to, these things will not be in there. And more pictures and more details about what we do with our clients when we lock them into a room for 2 weeks. As you can see, we have tons of stickies all over the walls, and we're just planning out everything that we can so that the team can understand what the business need is and how we should implement the technology to help them. During this process, we also reduce as much waste out of the business process as possible so that we're not just implementing a lift and shift. It is literally a reinvention of the workflow or the business process. The piece that we really push for, we show a video of this if you haven't seen it on YouTube or the movie of the Pentagon Wars, is the Bradley. We stress very heavily to our clientele that we should never build a Bradley. And this is basically saying that you started off with one idea of what you wanted to do, but it ended up trying to serve 50 different purposes, but do none of them well. And we've gotten to a certain level of maturity with our clientele where they themselves will say, oh, wait, I think I'm building the Bradley. We should probably stop talking about this. And none of this could be achievable without the right technology in place. We have ERPs from the early 2000s and so on and so forth. We run PeopleSoft. We have for our financials and our HR, but we also have newer tools like Appian and Sitecore. And these technologies, the newer technologies, really help us in this innovation and agile ability to deliver. ERPs can be very difficult and to develop on and be agile on. That's understandable. And so when you choose the new technologies to bring lift to your organization in these digital transformations, make sure it's a good partner. Not all of them are good agile partners. In the end, you want something that's going to allow you to build Lego pieces up top of a platform, whereas you build one thing, but you can reuse it somewhere else and expand it into an ecosystem of solutions rather than these one-off siloed apps that's what is traditional in early IT years. And so if you really think about Agile, and going back to, again, to the Gartner reference, it's kind of like you have to go through these iterations of learning from your mistakes, going back and reflecting, and then applying what you've learned to the next level of development. And so it's a continuous learning curve, continuously improving. And the worst thing you can do is be overconfident and say that we've reached the highest levels we can be in terms of Agile in our practice of Scrum. We never say that. If we see our team saying that, that's a red flag for us, because that means they feel that there's no more room for improvement, and there's always room for improvement. Now, the next piece that our CIO really likes to talk about is having the courage to do things that maybe are a little outside the box. And one of it is addressing the skill pool scarcity that we have in IT now. We all fight for the same resources. They're very small resources. As technology grows, we have huge gaps in where these resources come from. And being a university, we find it is our mission to grow and nurture these new talents. And we try to find opportunities to develop programs for students, for college students, or even people out in the communities in the Tampa Bay area to come back and relearn new skills so that they can fill the scarcity that we have out in market. And one of the things that we've been able to do, because Appian is a relatively new product and have a scarcity pool of good developers for folks to hire, we've created a partnership with Appian to train our students on the 2-week boot camp that Appian offers, usually up in DC. We offer it now on-site in the university. We recruit our own students. They spend 2 weeks with us doing a project, and at the end they do an assessment with us through Appian's home training team. And at the end of it, the ones that pass the assessment are now certified Appian developers, Tier 1, or the 200 series, I should say. And these students, we then allow Appian to send out to anyone that's interested in hiring these students to be in their team. And this is all at no cost to the student, and we feel that it's been a really great program for us. And if you would like more information, please let me know, because we have an email that you can send to. We're actually just about to go through another round of boot camp in May. We are doing our extreme hiring right now, where we bring them in, have them do activities to assess whether or not they're able to be good team players, if they're agile, if they have a growth mindset, and then we do a panel interview with them just to see how they respond under pressure. After that, then they go into boot camp. Now, everything is great and all, but I think the key thing that we really have to focus on and talk through is how are we delivering value to our university as an IT organization. And we have spent a lot, the last, I would say, 3 years, trying to figure out how best to align ourselves to the strategies and goals that the university has for us all in the Tampa Bay area. And we try to make sure that when it's working well, we've identified that these are the type of things that you should see as symptoms of a good working team, as well as alignment with our clients. They should be happy, and they see value. We are actually capturing testimonials every time we release, every quarter, of when they saw value in what we delivered and how it's changed their lives. We are creating little mini marketing campaigns internally just so we can show how we've provided value back to the organization. IT is no longer a shadow group. We are very much a partnership with our clients. These are things that we're doing internally to communicate as well as to share what we've done. And we have very happy people willing to contribute to these testimonials because they believe in it. We are very laser focused on removing waste. We have simplified a lot of our paper-driven workflows in the past 3 years and have saved millions of dollars depending on the process that we worked on. And I can go into that in details if someone would like, but it's really about making sure that every time we go through planning that we're reducing as much waste as possible from the workflow. We do not ignore technical debt. It is something that's a challenge always, simply because our clients always want more of what we can deliver, and since we're able to deliver faster with tools like Appian, per se, we do 10x development. So we're 10 times faster than we would be in, say, a normal traditional custom development. And so the amount of features that we give out and the amount of content that we're allowed to produce for our clientele only increases the hunger for more. However, that also means we have technical debt that we have to take care of. So we try to negotiate a well balance between new features as well as the technical debt that we accrued as we grow. And speaking to the customer experience piece that Andrew mentioned earlier, this is how we explain to our provost how much we've delivered in the past, I would say, 3 years for him at the university. And the first thing we identified is the different stages that our student goes through as a student at the University of South Florida. And we start from the beginning when they're applying all the way to the end where they become an alumni. And we showed him this very basic Excel sheet of what we have delivered in the past 3 years. And you can see that it's quite stunning visually because we started our pilot in 2015, and year over year we've basically doubled what we've been able to deliver just for the provost, just for the student side. We're not even talking about our administration, we're not even talking about our faculty. And that in 2018, we're only about a quarter way in, so there's going to be more than what's shown here. But when we show this is so telling about what we've been able to develop and at the speed that we've been able to develop. None of this would have been able to be as fast or as effective and cross-team, cross-business if it wasn't for the right tools. And that's it.
Thank you, Alice. That's fantastic, and really great insights around not only obviously the technology, but also just the team structure and how an organization really transforms into an agile delivery organization based on digital technologies. To continue, we're going to get to the questions and answers part here in just a second with both Alice and Andrew, but to summarize and close out a little insight about the technology that Alice talked about in the sponsor of this webinar today at Appian and what we try to deliver to organizations like University of South Florida. We simply market our product as a platform for digital transformation. It is designed as a low-code, visual way of building enterprise business apps. And ultimately, we want to allow you to build those applications fast, be more agile, and be more innovative in how you go to market with these new digital technologies. And underpinning this is that mindset of low code. In the left-hand side here, we see the traditional code. And why low code is so effective is not only that visual paradigm is easier to learn, which increases the amount of resources that can actually contribute to digital transformation in your organization compared to code, but it's also easier to communicate to the business exactly what you're building. It's very difficult for, say, your business users to understand Java or .NET code directly, but if they can see a visual diagram of a process flow or a decision table or a visual interface and understand, communicate the impact of that design on the application, and therefore give you much faster feedback of how you want that to iteratively improve through agile sprint cycles. And of course, the types of applications that our customers are deploying are things like brand new applications that didn't exist before, maybe things that you were doing in Excel and Microsoft Office before, now can actually be built in a cloud-based platform. As well, extending legacy environments. Maybe you have those old ERP systems that are not mobile enabled or possibly lack effective process or data controls. You can always implement Appian as a low-code platform to augment existing investments. And as both Andrew and Alice talked about, it's that customer journey perspective. Many times the customer journey of a organization, as a customer interacting with the organization, is defined by the siloed systems that we have in place. You know, they need to go sign up for an account here. Then they need to register for a product here. Then they need to get support for that product here. It's different applications, different systems that also manifest into a disjointed customer experience. Many times also you want to leverage technology like Appian to unite those backend systems, provide a seamless customer journey and process flow across all your existing IT investments. So again, the types of applications that you can adopt low code for accelerating digital transformation, customer journey management, business operations, governance, risk, and compliance, many of the common areas that we look forward to in customer implementations and accelerating their digital needs. And finally, Appian is recognized as a leader in low code by organizations like Forrester. And Gartner had this to say about Appian's APAS solution is an easy-to-use offering. It has a robust metadata model that enables citizen developers to build applications with minimal involvement from professional and system administrators. Which is really the underpinning of what Appian's all about is we try to make it easy to not only build those initial enterprise software apps, but also evolve them over time and keep them fresh and meaningful to your customers. So I'd like to thank everyone for the time today. We're going to transition over to some questions as I take a quick look at surveying the questions. Let's go back actually first to Andrew. Andrew, if you're still on the line, we have the first question for you, which actually goes back to what we refer to as slide 11 here. He asks, what is the difference in your definition, Andrew, between a process model and a business model? And really, how do those correlate or overlap or don't overlap?
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Malcolm. That's a great question, and thank you for whoever asked it. That is something that is not well understood. So a process model is basically a set of activities that convert an input into value-added outputs. Process models are for end-to-end processes like new product development, order fulfillment, so forth and so on. A business model is how we create value for the customer from a much higher level view. It includes the value pathways, which actually are a set of processes, but also focused on how we are organized, our org chart, what information technology we deploy, what suppliers we need to collaborate with, what locations we have. There's actually a very interesting, easy-to-read book by Andrew Campbell on the operating model canvas, which allows organizations to document their business model. So quite similar, but quite different.
Yeah, that's great insight. And of course, one maybe is aligned to a business goal, which a process may or may not be, say, directly supportive of. Another question, though, coming in for Alice here. Alice, when you're considering an initial project, what are the considerations and initial steps that you recommend organizations take part in when starting a first project on a platform like this?
Yes, that's a really good question. We actually had that same question ourselves when we first started. one of the best advice that I received was to map it to the business value that you'll get from your business units. One is you want to pick a medium size. You don't want something that's too risky or too complex. So the happy medium is always the best. When we started, we picked something that had one integration and then medium level complexity in terms of the workflow, for example, just so that we can have a pilot and make sure that you push it to production as soon as you can. You do not want to wait too long, otherwise you will not get to see the value of the product, and it may cause you to have some issues later down the road. Because when we first did the pilot, our client did not want to go live for 3 months after we've actually finished the product. They wanted to continue to tinker, and our CIO had to step in and say, no, you really should go live and see how it works before, and so that we know where the strengths and the weakness of the product is.
Mm-hmm. It's great insight. Just getting it out there and actually testing it. True iterative development is getting that actual feedback from the field rather than just speculation, right?
Yep.
So another question, actually, going back to Andrew here, what relationship should you keep between a customer journey, a business process, and a corporate architecture or company architecture? And in your perspective, how those things correlate between each other?
Okay, well, that's a very thought-provoking question, Malcolm. Thank you so much. I really see the relationship between a customer journey map and process models for end-to-end processes as being the principal things to have a relationship with. As I think I said in the presentation, we need to identify the key moments of truth in a customer journey and then the end-to-end business processes that create value at those moments of truth. The organizational structure, I see it as being less relevant. But the other thing I'd like to say is that over the years, we have gone into way too much detail when we develop models, both for customer journey maps and especially for process models. We sometimes forget that the principal value of models is to stimulate dialogue among people and insights. And so high-level iterative model development is what I would suggest to create that relationship between customer journey maps and process models.
Well, expanding on that, and maybe another question kind of related to that, is as you start to implement these models into functional solutions, which digital technologies do you think are going to have the greatest impact on the overall customer experience?
Well, that's a really good question. I think my own opinion is that artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, and the Internet of Things. I mean, it's amazing what's happening. So I play tennis, albeit poorly, but I do play. And Babolat just introduced a racket that is a smart racket that gives me, if I had one, which I don't because I play with a head racket, the Babolat racket gives you your swing speed and all kinds of other data. So what an amazing impact on the customer experience for a tennis player. So those sensors and the combination of insights to cognitive computing and Internet of Things, I think, are likely to have the biggest impact. Some people think blockchain. I'm not so sure I agree with that. But my view is artificial intelligence and Internet of Things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the explosion of data that really gives us even greater insight into the operations, as you implied, with a tennis racket, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, certainly looking forward to it. I guess to follow up on that, I guess maybe going back to Alice as a final question here. In your implementation experience, what's more important to ensure success of a new digital effort? Is it setting out with the right vision or having the right strategy for implementation? I guess it's hard to choose between the two. I imagine both.
Yeah, I think it really is a bit of both. What we really have to do is the way we go about it is we sit with our clients and think through the impact mapping, which is a GPS guide, for those that don't know what it is, which gives you kind of options where you can pivot if something doesn't work out, which is really great. Where common roadmaps, it's just one directional, right? So if you stop in the middle of it and it doesn't work, then what happens? Whereas the impact mapping allows you the options. So if this one doesn't work out, you still have another means to reach your goal or metric that you've measured. And so that kind of ties back both the vision and the strategy together, I think, for us, and it works out to be what we use.
That's awesome. Well, I think the last question actually here is for Appian, so I'll take this one. It says, as an independent consultant, how do I get on an opportunity to learn Appian? Just to answer that as the Appian perspective, the best way to start out is go to community.appian.com. From the community.appian.com site, you'll find all of our discussion threads from practitioners like Alice and all the consultants and other organizations working on the Appian product, as well as the opportunity to participate in discussions yourself. And you also find access to all of our documentation and training material also from that community site. As well, if you go to our Appian.com experience, using a registered business email account, you can get access to a free trial experience using that free trial link at the top of Appian.com. Best way to get started, learn more about the Appian platform and how to explore that for your own needs as well. I'd like to thank, of course, Andrew and Alice for the time today. Really great insights from both Spanyi International as well as University of South Florida. If you do have any further questions or comments, or if your question did not get answered today, feel free to follow up with us. You can contact us at info@appian.com or malcolm.ross@appian.com as well. We'll try to get those questions answered for you. And thanks again, Alice. And Andrew, any final thoughts?
No, thank you for the opportunity to present it today, Malcolm. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks.
Great, thank you. And I think we had a really great time as far as those insights. And thank you. Look forward to seeing you at our next webinars.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.